This quarterback matchup would have been sick in 2013.
Ah, man, who you telling?
Yeah.
It's good today, too, but for, like, another reason, if you like comedy or something like that.
First off, you can't be sitting here dogging old guys, right? Okay, you know, like, look, we're in an era where
I'm probably older than both of them.
Yeah, well, I know I am, for sure. But you know, listen, the Golden Bachelor, like, there's a renaissance here for us older folks. And, you know, as the great Jimmy Buffett once said, you know, I'm growing older, but not up.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour, Happy Love-Hate Day. And here at the Happy Hour bar, the olds drink for free.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a
right.
good time to be old.
Is it?
Yeah, it's never been better.
It beats the alternative. I'll tell
Right.
you that much.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, it is. The olds drink for free. We don't card here. We don't card.
No, well,
I mean, the youngins we do.
yeah, I was going to say, there is a line.
Youngins, but
Yes.
you know, at some point, right? Exactly.
Oh, man.
There's
Love-Hate
a joke
Day.
that I was about to make, but then I thought, you know what?
Keep it in the holster?
Yeah, might as well.
That's okay.
I'll tell that one off air.
We still got 58 minutes
Yeah,
left.
it's a good point.
See where it goes.
It's a good point. Exactly. The show is young.
Yeah.
I could still find a different opportunity to fire myself. Yeah. All right.
We're going to use these 58 minutes wisely. Big game tonight, Matthew. Commanders in Philadelphia. Let's go. Big Thursday night game. Yep.
Huge. And it's this will be a real test for the Commanders because, listen, they lost a tough one to Pittsburgh, a heartbreaker to the Steelers. Eagles won like 5 in a row. The Commanders are more desperate here, right? The Eagles, I believe, are half a game up now in the NFC East, and so this is how Washington, a young team, a team that's not used to success, how they react to that heartbreaking loss to the Steelers, I think, is really telling. You know, having to go on the road to a division rival on a short week, can they rebound and take care of business against this Eagles team? I think they're more desperate than the Eagles team, but you know, whether they're more talented or not, whether they can put it together remains to be seen. So huge game. You don't want to lose 2 in a row, you know, and drop to 7-4.
No.
I would not like that.
Well, I think you've got the better quarterback,
Oh,
but I think
do you?
don't have the better team. I think the Eagles will win tonight. Sorry, Matthew. It's the better roster. This is a team. The Eagles,
they are a better
They
roster.
were built to win the Super Bowl this year. This Commanders team was not built to
building.
win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But Jayden Daniels gives you a chance in any game.
Jayden Daniels gives us a chance in a game, and you know who else gives us a chance in a game? Nick Sirianni.
Oh, yeah.
That's very fair.
Has there ever been? What are the Eagles? Are they 7-2? Has there
Yeah.
ever been a more maligned coach of a 7-2 team in NFL history than Nick Sirianni? I'm
I
ready
don't-
to move on.
Well, when you go your own crowd, you do open a door that's a little dangerous.
There's some decisions where you're just like, really?
Yeah, things have gotten better.
Things have gotten
This
better.
is a big one tonight, though.
This is a
Home
big one
field,
tonight.
division game.
Yeah.
Still a
Means a lot for
weirdness.
first place.
It's a very bad vibe 7-2 team. Why don't they give Saquon the ball at the 1 on first down? I just don't understand why they ever do that.
Why don't
It's
they
so
use it?
weird.
Why don't they use him in the passing game? So we'll see. You know, and I'd feel better about it if we had Marshawn Lattimore. It's always great when you can give up a bunch of picks to, you know, have a guy that you can't use.
Yes.
You know, like
Well,
in a
the good
stretch where
news
you really
is
needed him.
Eagles don't have any good wide receivers anyway, so
I mean,
it'll be
like,
fine.
you know, so I don't know. I mean, listen, the Eagles are 3.5-point favorites in this one as well. I took the Commanders to cover, though, Jay. What do you think about that?
I like the Eagles to cover.
Do you really?
I
What is
think
it
that,
settling at right now? 2.5?
No,
it's
it's
at
moving
3.5.
up. It's now right now on DraftKings. It just moved to -4. on
Oh,
my
really?
screen.
Okay.
So I think the issue is that the Commanders been playing a ton of man coverage. And that would work a lot more if you had Marshawn Lattimore against
Right.
A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So
Correct.
that's a problem. I think the Commanders' run defense is also a bit suspect. Like, I think the Eagles are just going to move the ball. And the Eagles' defense is much better than it was last year. This has been an elite defense the past month or so. Quentin, Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, I think have really changed it. So I think the Eagles are just the better team. It's also tough, like going on the road on a short week, rookie quarterback and everything. So, look, I think Commanders are going to make the
they're
playoffs
favored
with
for a
these.
reason.
Yeah, but I think the Eagles will win and cover.
No
All
matter
right,
what
well, we'll
side
find
you're
out.
on, we're going to have our best bets for you. That'll include things beyond the spread, especially our player props. But that'll be for the end of the show. For now, we jump into love-hate because we have a long list to get through. And the love list starting
You know
with
what's annoying?
What's annoying?
Well, just, you know, everything that Jay just said.
Makes a lot of sense.
I agree with it. It all makes sense.
good
Yeah,
analysis.
It's annoying.
It's
I know.
fair
It's
analysis.
frustrating. It's annoying. I want to argue with him. I want to tell him he's dumb. He's wrong.
If you want to feel better, anything can happen, especially on Thursdays.
Yeah, listen, it's an
where you
NFL
kinda
game.
throw more things out the
there
door.
have been primetime games between the Commanders and the Eagles, where the Eagles were a significantly better
Right.
team than they are. Where
Well, then they were perfect 2 years ago, right?
Exactly. I was just going to say that Monday night game where the Eagles were like 12-0.
Yeah.
and the Commanders had no business going in there with Taylor Heineke, I believe, and beating them, and they did.
Yeah.
Right. So like that was a much more disparate chasm between the Eagles and the Commanders in terms of talent. So yes, it's one football game. Anything can happen. Yep. Hail the Commanders, hail victory. Here's hoping. But I agree with you. Like if they play it on paper, they have the better team, top to bottom, no question.
Before the season, the look-ahead line for this game would have been like Eagles -10 or something, and it's -4. So that shows how far the Commanders have come.
All right, love, hate. We get to the running backs. We start with Joe Mixon. He's got the Cowboys on deck. But besides how big this game is and how big this season has been for Joe Mixon, something even more important to him came up this week. Take a listen.
It's a hell of a blessing, man, for your teammates to, point you out to being the leader and to be able to lead by example and obviously be there for my teammates and uplift their game and to be in this position. I mean, it means everything to me. So the best thing that I can really do is just up the intensity with everything that I do. Obviously, when it's a captain, everything is magnified and you got to hold that accountability towards yourself as well. So it's a blessing, and I'm very grateful, man.
Joe Mixon loving his time in Houston and loving being named a team captain from his teammates. Matthew, what you love is that he has Dallas, who's allowed the second most rushing touchdowns this season.
Yeah, and they've given up multiple rushing touchdowns in 3 of the last 4 games. So you got a shot here at maybe not just 1, but 2 scores for Joe Mixon. He's just getting massive volume, Connor. I remember a couple of weeks ago, like the line was 18.5. You took the over, and it cashed.
It was 20.
Right.
It's 20.
He's had 4 straight games, even against the Lions, even against the Lions' elite defense. He's still got north of 20 carries in that game. Like 4 straight games now with at least 24 touches for Joe Mixon, and every running back that's seen at least 17 touches, you figure he's getting 17 touches. Every running back that's gotten at least 17 touches against the Cowboys so far this season has scored at least 18 fantasy points. The addition, we expect Nico Collins to be back in this game, guys, so I think that opens things up because you can no longer load the box saying, you know what, we'll take our chances in single coverage with like Robert Woods and Xavier Hutchinson. Like, no, and John Mechie. It's a nice story and everything like that. But Tank Dell really the only guy that you got to really focus on. But now that Nico Collins is there, you're going to have to do some bracket coverage. You're going to have to play back a little bit more with Tank Dell and Nico Collins on the field. So I do think there'll be some more open running lanes for Joe Mixon. And this team is still going to want to run the ball, especially on Monday night, especially on the road at Dallas, where, let's face it, the Cowboys have been brutal this year.
They've been brutal. Texans.
But no sun on Monday night.
No sun on Monday night.
So there you go. No need for curtains on Monday night.
We hope so. Yeah, we hope there's no sun on Monday night. So the Texans are 7-point favorites in that game, which is an indictment on where the Cowboys are at right now because the Texans aren't playing super well. To me, one of the most jarring stats in football right now, the past 4 weeks, Joe Mixon has received a minimum of 24 carries in every game, and the Texans are 1-3. Like that, that, speaking of indictments, that just has to be an indictment on Bobby Slowick. I'm sorry. You can't be running the ball this much, but for fantasy purposes, like we know what's going to happen. They're going to keep running the ball. He averaged 1.8 yards per carry against the Lions, and they ran him 25 times. Like at some point, you got to try something else. It's insane.
Maybe, but honestly, like they should have won that. Well, I guess you can argue that game cost was on the offense, right? I mean, like they
got
just too many
5
field
picks
goals.
and they lost the game.
Correct. They got too many field goals. They just red zone. But how much of that is Slowick and the play calling, and how much of that is C.J. Stroud? C.J. Stroud has not played well.
No, he's
the
back.
line has been bad too.
Correct, but it's a trickle-down effect because he's been like he's seeing ghosts back there.
Right, it is a trickle effect, and I think what kind of made Slowick go back to that way was on Thursday Night Football against the Jets, a game they're somehow underdogs, and they did lose. They come out and they throw the ball on the first 6 plays of the game. And everyone's looking around like, oh my God, it's the Jets. Just run the ball. So it felt like Slowick went, okay, we'll do things the way everybody else wants it. It didn't work at all. They didn't throw the ball well at all against the Jets, and then they got running with Joe Mixon. So I think this is really who they are and want to be.
Yeah, I wonder if, I mean, this is not a fantasy discussion, but last year Bobby Slowick was a hot head coaching candidate, and I think a lot of
won't be this year.
I know, that's what I was going to say. Like Ben Johnston last year was like the hottest head coaching candidate, got a lot of buzz, and then some of the assistants. But Slowick got some love, and people were like, well, he's young and he only had 1 year as a coordinator, and so maybe people thought he needed a little more seasoning. But I do know that he was mentioned for a couple of jobs. Like he was in the mix.
So much so that the Texans had to get out in front of it, and they released like a co-statement saying he was happy with the team. I'm sure he got a raise. and that he was going to not take head coaching interviews and keep improving as
That's
an
right.
offensive coordinator. Like, very early in the process.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
if that didn't happen, he was getting interviews.
Yeah, for sure.
So how quickly things could change.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think so much this year.
I never really understood how much of Slowick last year was just he had CJ Stroud as his quarterback. Because the main thing I remember from Bobby Slowick last year is week 18 against the Colts, where CJ Stroud was thrown for 25 yards every single time he dropped back, and then they just kept on running the ball.
But listen, as we're sitting here killing the guy, I mean, but he gets credit for that. No one thought CJ Stroud, especially with that Texans offense at the beginning of last year, that they were going to be any good at all. CJ Stroud was a revelation, and you got to get credit. Like, if you're sitting here killing for the offense this year, he's got to get credit for developing C.J. Stroud on some level last year. I mean, again, like there was a reason at the end of going into last year, there was a reason why the Panthers were picking 1 and the Texans were picking 2. And the Texans made some trades and they also improved their defense, but still, no one. And they added D'Amico Ryans as head coach. Like, it was a whole over. But no one sat there and said, you know who's going to be competing for the AFC South title this year? It's the Houston Texans.
Yeah.
I mean, C.J. Stroud played out of his mind last year, and
it's
you have to give Slowick some credit for that.
Yeah, I would assume so, that something of that is to do with Slowick. It's also so difficult to assign credit to how a quarterback develops. Like, everyone last year was like, oh, Dave Canales has fixed Baker Mayfield. Like, Baker Mayfield looks even better this year under Liam Cohen. Is that because Dave Canales gave him the building blocks in the first place? Like, it's difficult to say, but yeah, certainly for this year, Stroud seems to have taken a step back, and for fantasy purposes, that means that Joe Mixon is just an absolute monster because he's going to continue to get work, and Joe Mixon is one of the best running backs in the NFL.
And how much of that is because Nico Collins been out of the lineup, and then they lose Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell's been in and out, and it's been different guys out there, plus the injuries to the offensive line.
Yep.
Versus, by the way, they're more balanced this year, which is what we said in the preseason.
Didn't they score 7 points against the Vikings when they had everyone back in week 2 or 3? Like, it wasn't perfect even before Nico went down.
This is correct.
The peaks and valleys have been tough. That's been the issue.
Either way, all this is to say, we love Joe Mixon this week.
RB5.
He's gonna get the ball over 20 times in a great matchup against the Cowboys as touchdown favorites against Dallas.
We also love the duo in Detroit, Sonic and Knuckles, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery.
I'm not in on that nickname.
Why not?
I don't know. You're on an island with this one.
Yeah,
Everyone else likes
great.
Sonic and Knuckles?
Yes.
I think you're just Bobby Slowick running the ball on this one.
Everyone's yelling,
It's a
please
video
stop,
game.
please stop.
It's a video
It's a
game.
show.
Is the
It's
show
originated from a video game, but now it's a show.
There's a show-
Kids really like this.
there's
I
a
don't
show
even have
called
kids. My nephew loves it.
show
Every
called
time
Sonic
over,
and
he's
Knuckles.
watching this.
Yeah, I mean, my kids are now 13, so they don't watch shows; they watch TikTok and
right.
this. This is how my kids watch TV.
World's going
it's on their
well.
phone,
Yeah,
right?
Brain
world's going
poison.
great.
Yeah, 1,000%. All right. So Sonic and Knuckles. Not crazy about the nickname. I'm still going to own that. But I am crazy about the matchup. I am crazy about both these guys this week as well. The matchup is against Jacksonville. Right, and so Jacksonville allows the third most fantasy points per game to running backs this season. Running backs that see at least 15 touches against the Jags, actually averaging 19.8 fantasy points per game. You see it there on your screen in terms of the most fantasy points allowed to running backs. They're third in the NFL. And both Gibbs and Montgomery are averaging 15 or more touches per game. So again, we think both these guys are going to get 15 touches against Jacksonville in a game in which, obviously, they are heavily favored almost by 2 touchdowns in this one. So you expect both guys to get at least 15 touches. And again, if you get 15 touches against the Jaguars, you're averaging about 20 fantasy points per game. Both guys are top 14 plays for me this week.
Yeah, I would guess as well, after the Lions really struggled to run the ball and establish the run against the Texans, that if anything, there would be an overcorrection to get back to what their identity is.
Josh Jacobs next up on our love list. It's Sonic and Knuckles, by the way. RB10 for Jahmyr Gibbs, RB15 for David Montgomery. I'm just going to keep hammering this nickname.
You're by all means, you can. And this is the kind of thing I'm going to bring up on Worse Lands.
Yes, that's a good idea.
Did you hear this,
No,
Jay?
no, I don't
Lawrence and
listen
I's
to the
plan? No.
He was
listen.
off, and by off, very
So-
far away.
Right. So you know how Connor does 8 zillion different shows,
Yeah.
right? He fits us in between all of his other obligations. And so one
Pro
of the
football stock or whatever you called it
whatever
yesterday.
It's hard to keep track. You need a
net
scorecard,
spot.
honestly, to figure out everything that he does. But one of the ones he does is called Badlands, and it's about the Jets.
Sure.
And so Lawrence and I are going to start a podcast called Worse Lands,
Right.
which is about the Giants.
Yes.
But secretly, Worse Lands isn't really about the Giants, but it's mostly about just MFing Badlands.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
The entire
rivalry.
show is just we say another bad game for Daniel Jones. Did you hear what Connor Rogers said? And then we just MF Connor for 20 minutes.
Sure.
And we just try to start a fight with Badlands. We're Worse Lands.
Yeah,
do you
seems like
think?
an incredible book podcast idea. I don't see any way that would fail at all.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly.
You've done it again, Barry.
Lawrence was super into it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can tell.
Well, Lawrence and I have been fielding calls left and right from title sponsors. We're sifting through all the offers.
Yeah.
People want to be
Seems
associated
like it'd be
with
a
the worst lands.
great 3.5 minutes of episode 1.
Right.
And then,
Literally.
then
Never again.
Yeah.
Goes on SoundCloud, not even like a real server.
You can bitch about.
SoundCloud.
Listen, there's a lot of stuff you can bitch
That's
about.
a
You can bitch about the
SoundCloud
Giants.
podcast.
You can bitch about the Giants versus the Jets. You can bitch about Connor. Like honestly, that's enough for a show. That's enough for
45 minutes
1,000%.
into that.
And by the way, if you don't get on board, we might bitch about you.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Connor's got a friend,
Yes.
Jay
Yeah.
Croucher, and then we'd start,
We'll welcome you
MFing
on Badlands.
Yeah. But you can do one about bet the circle or something as opposed to the edge. Bet the smooth
the
surface.
polygon.
I don't know. That sounds interesting to
Yeah.
me. It's whatever. But Badlands, I want to take down. I want to take down with worse lands.
Good luck. We've survived a lot of bad Jet seasons.
Yeah.
We're battle tested.
New York sports
That
not
I
great
believe.
at the moment. It's not going well for New York sports.
It hasn't in a long
Ever
time.
since the
Never since the Liberty.
Ever since the 5th inning for the Yankees against the Dodgers, it's all been
Wait till the
downhill.
Mets get one
The Mets
soon.
are the only vibey
Yes.
team. The
Yeah.
Rangers, kind of.
Yeah,
they
it's
kind of
not
tell
great right now.
teetering.
Knicks might be all right.
No,
they're not that good.
Lost to the Bulls last night.
Yeah, they're not that
They
good.
did. They can turn around.
Everyone in
Carl
the East is
Anthony.
bad,
I think
except
the
for
most
Boston
important
and
thing about the
Cleveland.
Knicks is that Carl Anthony Towns is doing awesome for Live at Noon, Live at 3 on the Cock, my NBA
Great.
assholes team. Live at 3 on the Cock, yeah.
That's good. Yeah,
I'm just-
and it's good that you know he plays for the Knicks.
Yes!
That's a big.
Come
a
on.
big win.
jump.
You're
Yeah.
impressed that I knew that, right?
It's all trending up for Barry.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
Josh
I'm crushing
Jacobs.
Steven in our league this week. I'm
He
just
gets
telling you.
crushed often.
Yes.
Our last running back in the top 15 here is Josh Jacobs. He's RB14 for Matthew here, Jay. Listen to this. Things have been bad for the Bears, but I think a lot of people wouldn't realize over the last 4 weeks, they're allowing 175 rush yards per game. It's been all Caleb Williams focused, but this run defense has been brutal on top of that.
Whole team just seems broken at the moment. They're 5.5-point dogs at home to the Packers. This was a team that looked like it was going to be really in the playoff mix after that win over the Jags in London. And then not only did the Hail Mary cost them a win, it also cost them their whole season, because after that it's just been an absolute mess. And so you expected the Packers are going to be leading. Josh Jacobs running the ball against the suspect run defense. There's no reason why Jacobs shouldn't have a massive game.
Yeah, I agree with it. You talk about Chicago in this matchup. Like normally you'd say, like, oh, that's a tough matchup. Yes, the offense struggles, but the Bears' defense has been pretty good this year. But the truth of the matter is not recently, and definitely not against the run. Over the last 4 weeks, they're giving up 175 rushing yards per game. That is second most in the NFL. Teams that face the Bears during that stretch are averaging over 28 running back carries per game, and part of that obviously is because of the failures of the offense, and so you have short drives, and other teams are getting the ball and just winning time of possession. But running backs that get at least 17 touches against the Bears this season, they're averaging 100 yards from scrimmage, and so Josh Jacobs off of the bye at home the game's in Chicago, but off of the bye in a division game against the Bears, yes, Aaron Rodgers owns the Bears, but I think Jacobs might rent them this week.
Yes, no, I agree.
Others
what I
receiving
did
votes,
there? Yeah,
Kenneth
that's very
Walker.
good.
You
Yeah.
could have just
Five
let it
today.
lay.
Yeah.
Others receiving votes, Kenneth
I
Walker,
just wanted to make sure I pointed that out in case you missed it.
Nick Chubb, Jalen Warren,
my wordplay.
Audric Estime makes the others receiving votes, sneaking in the top 30 there, Matthew. It's Estime time.
Yeah,
Don't
we talked about
underestimate
Estime.
him.
We've talked about him a lot over the couple of weeks. I know one of your podcasts talks about him a ton. But 82% of the Broncos running back
watch.
rushes last week. Highest rate by a Denver running back in a game this season. It's a nice matchup at home against Atlanta. Najee Harris, your boy Najee Jay, has been banged up this week. I don't know if he's going to be able to go against Baltimore, but either way, the way you attack Baltimore with your running back is through the air. Over the last month, the Ravens giving up the second most receiving yards per game to running backs. Obviously, Warren is the receiving down back for the Steelers. And then we talked about Nick Chubb the other day as well on the Wednesday show here. Saints have given up multiple rushing touchdowns in 4 of the last 5 games. Chubb's getting a lot of work here. We expect the offense to be better under Jameis Winston in a revenge game scenario. And the last one, Kenneth Walker, just the passing game usage against the Niners.
While Jalen Warren makes the love list, his teammate, as you said, Matthew, Najee Harris, things not looking good, Jay. He's on the hate list. He's banged up, and only one running back has rushed for 50-plus yards against Baltimore this season.
Yep, they're the biggest pass funnel in the NFL, the Ravens. So there's that aspect where no one is able to run on Baltimore. I think the other aspect, too, is that this could be the week where there is the reckoning for the Steelers, and this finally runs out. Russell Wilson, his production overall has been so dependent on the deep ball and that is unsustainable, I think. And so I think the Baltimore should be playing with a lead in this one. They're inching towards 3.5-point favorites on DraftKings, so tough run defense, likely game script not in their favor, so tough to start Najee Harris.
Yeah, and you see some of the list of names of guys that have not even gotten to 60 rushing yards against the Ravens. Chase Brown twice, Pacheco, Nick Chubb, Javonte Williams. None of them even got to 60 yards. Nick Chubb's the only one that broke 50 against them as well. And so you add all that to the fact that Najee Harris isn't particularly healthy at the moment, and there's only been 5 times this entire year that a running back scored even 11 fantasy points against the Ravens. And in 4 of those instances, the running back got at least 50% of their fantasy points in that game from receiving. And so Harris just isn't used in the passing game the way that Warren is. So that's why Warren is on the love list. He's my running back 24 this week. Harris is on the hate list. He's my running back 26. But of course, love, hate, all about expectations. I've raised them for Warren this week, lowered them for your boy Najee.
Good news for Brian Robinson on Thursday Night Football. He is off the injury report after having some limited practices to start the week. The bad news for Brian Robinson here, Matthew, is that over the past 4 weeks, the Eagles are allowing the second fewest rush yards per game to running backs. He walks off the injury report into a really bad matchup.
Really bad. We don't know how healthy he is. He's going to gut it out. He's one of the toughest players in the NFL. But, what you're hoping for with Brian Robinson, because the matchup isn't great, well, maybe at least he falls into the end zone. And there's always a chance that he does that. Here's the concern even on that. Like, the Eagles have allowed only 2 running touchdowns to running backs in 9 games this year. 2 in 9. So even the odds of him falling in the end zone aren't as good as they would be in a normal game. Week 3, the last time a running back scored more than 12.5 fantasy points against the Birds. So love Brian Robinson, as you guys know, one of my favorite players in the NFL, but sadly makes the hate list. He's outside my top 20 for the week.
How real do you think the Eagles' defense is? Because the numbers are amazing. They haven't played a great deal, though they did kind of shut down Cincinnati, which was impressive.
I think it's no coincidence since Cooper DeJean has gotten off the injury report and been inserted to this defense, what kind of juice it's given them. Great tackler, good in coverage, and he's just helped the load of talent they already have. So I think they're for real right now and trending upward rather than everybody else that's getting injured and trending downward. Also, Bryce Huff finally got going last week. That's a big sign for them.
There is, but I mean, Jacksonville almost beat them. And if Trevor Lawrence doesn't throw a duck to a freaking linebacker right into the end zone, right? I mean, so I don't know. I mean, again, maybe this is me. Why I'm wearing my burgundy and gold glasses. I'm full on Homer McHomerson over here, but I don't know. I think Jay's point is correct, which is the Eagles have been awesome over the last 5 weeks. They haven't, with the exception of Cincinnati, they haven't beaten anybody real.
No.
They're beating up on the on the Giants and the Browns.
It's inflated.
I will say though, it is always a very good indicator when you take out the trash and do it emphatically. To be beating these teams, even you beat the Giants by 25 points, that's impressive. They beat Cincy by 20. They completely destroyed Dallas as well in a game that I think there was the expectation that might be close, and it wasn't. So, the Jacksonville game was a bit of a mess, as was the Cleveland game, but overall I think things very much trending up for the Birds.
Yes.
Bird up.
Yeah, exactly.
The original Bird up.
Yeah, the original Bird up. Fly, Eagle, fly.
Original recipe.
Yeah.
Our final running back here on the hate list, Tony Pollard.
The other thing that's annoying is that I have a ton of friends that are diehard Eagles fans, and they're all annoying. I mean, right. Yeah, obviously,
They're a polarizing fan base.
They are a polarizing
I would call them
fanboys. No, I mean, like really good friends, and so all my phone's been blowing up, and just if they lose tonight, if my Commanders lose tonight, which
you're going to hear it.
Oh, am I going to hear it?
That's all right. Well, you get to play them again in a few weeks.
Yeah.
At your house.
At our house, yes. Yeah. At our house.
Yes.
Where the plumbing actually works.
Raining from the sky.
Yeah. They fixed it. No ownership.
Yeah.
They put a couple bucks into the stadium.
Yeah. One of the great home field advantages in Washington, because not only do you get the benefits of the refs and the crowd and everything, but you also get a stadium that tries to kill Jalen Hurts.
Yes. People forget about that.
There is
that's hard to bake into the line.
Very scary.
Stadium
yeah, we'll see. Maybe there was also remember the time when the showers didn't work?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of issues over the years.
Yeah.
I think poop raining from the sky is number 1.
Yeah, that was number 1.
Yeah, with a bullet.
100%.
All right.
Dan Snyder.
Our last running back on the hate list is Tony Pollard. He played only 3 more snaps than a now healthy Tajay Spears last week. Matthew, is his work, you think, continue to go down against the Vikings?
That's the concern, right? One of the big arguments for Tony Pollard, even on an offense that's been inconsistent this year, is that he's just getting massive workload. But last week he played just 53% of the snaps, as you mentioned, only 3 more snaps than Tajay Spears. He had 13 touches in that game. And in all the games in which he's had less than 19 touches this year, he's had under 11 fantasy points. When he doesn't get the volume, he doesn't have the production. There have been only 3 running backs to score 12 or more points against Minnesota this season, and all of them had at least 19 touches. Again, Vikings very good defense. The way you score against them, massive workload. We don't expect it for Tony Pollard this week because of the presence of Tajay Spears. He's outside my top 20 this week, even with 4 teams on a bye.
We move over to love-hate pass catchers, and we start with George Pickens, who life has been good for George Pickens since Russell Wilson took over under center. Wide receiver 6 in points per game since Russ became the starter. We got to hear from both Russ and Pickens on their relationship.
George is just, he's been really showing up in special ways, man. I just got so much confidence in him, who he is, the competitor that he is. His practice habits have continued to grow, and he's a warrior out there, and just how he prepares.
Russ was just saying your relationship, how quickly it's grown. From your standpoint, why has that grown so quickly?
I'll probably just say repetition, for sure. Throwing after practice, throwing before practice, watching memes, watching films, and, other guys, so we can get our connection, to where it's A1. I'll probably say that's the most thing.
Love-hate pass catchers, such a different vibe. Russ is like if you casted a quarterback to play in a movie, where George Pickens is just big chillin' all the time. Wow,
1000%.
Big fan of each other, quite clearly, Matthew.
Well, obviously, because Russell just throws up these moon balls and Pickens makes him look brilliant.
Right.
It's a good scheme. He comes down with it, and if you're George Pickens, you're like, all right, Russ ain't great, but he ain't Kenny Pickett or Trubisky or
Mason Rudolph.
Yeah, or Mason Rudolph or any of the other guys they've rolled out there. Duck Hodges, was it?
It was a Duck Hodges era.
Yeah.
Maybe not long, but it existed.
Yeah, we miss Duck Hodges.
Mike Tomlin has really had a lot of tricks up his sleeve.
Yeah.
It's amazing they're always competitive.
Yeah.
He's just the greatest coach of all time.
He's amazing.
It's unbelievable.
He just Steelers quarterbacks over the years. Like, how about a little Bubby Brister? How about Mike Tomczak?
It's nuts.
Yeah,
he's doing great outside of Roethlisberger.
At any rate, George Pickens makes the love list this week. I have him as a top 5 fantasy play this week. Since Russell Wilson took over as a starter, he's the 6th best wide receiver in fantasy football. And you love the matchup against the Ravens, right? As good as the Ravens are against the run, they're that bad against the pass. They've given up at least 23 fantasy points to a wide receiver in 5 of their 6 games, 5 of their past 6, I should say as well. No team allows more touchdowns to wide receivers this season than the Baltimore Ravens. They've given up multiple wide receiver touchdowns in 4 of the past 6 as well. You can throw, and you can throw deep on them. Pickens, who is always a threat to come down with it, just throw it down there, and somewhere he's coming up with it. He makes some head-scratching moves. There's some things that you're just like, but the talent is undeniable with George Pickens, and clearly the way Russ is throwing the ball, Pickens is going to have opportunities in this game.
Yep, Kyle Hamilton as well didn't practice yesterday, which will be huge if he's out, because he is the best player in that secondary by far.
Nico Collins expected to make his return from a long, about a 5-week injury. Texans fans and the Texans love that, and so do fantasy managers. Jay, Dallas has allowed 6 touchdowns to wide receivers over their past 4 games. His offense has really looked rough without their number 1 wide receiver, and maybe the best receiver in all of fantasy before he got hurt.
He was playing like the best receiver in football before he went down against the Bills. Now he gets a very favorable matchup against Dallas. Now the Dallas pass rush will be better with Parsons back healthy for his 2nd game in a row, but these Dallas cornerbacks, Connor, they just haven't, like Trayvon Diggs just doesn't look right. Deron Bland not coming back has really hurt that team, so there's just nothing about the Dallas secondary that scares you.
Yeah, he had 4 healthy games this year, 29% target share, and Cowboys, to your point about that secondary, they've given up 4 touchdowns to wide receivers in just the last 2 games, 6 in the last 4 as well. Nico Collins he's one of the 5 best wide receivers in football when healthy, and this week he's going to be healthy.
And now he'll be playing without Stephon Diggs, so the target share could be somehow even higher. Speaking of which, Calvin Ridley makes the love list for us. I don't know how much of a correlation there is here, Matthew, but since DeAndre Hopkins was traded, Ridley is averaging over 20 points per game.
Yeah, whether it's Mason Rudolph or Will Levis, they're not scared to chuck it and chuck it deep. 36% target share and at least 70 yards, I should say, 70 or more receiving yards in all 3 games since DeAndre Hopkins was dealt to Kansas City. It's a nice matchup against Minnesota in this one aspect. They allow the 2nd most receptions per game on deep passes. So they are throwing it deep to Calvin Ridley. No wide receiver in the NFL actually has more deep targets this season than number 0, Calvin Ridley. So they're going to take some deep shots to him, and I think he comes down with at least 1 or 2. I'm as a top 20 play this week.
Yeah, I think the key there is just that Levis looked kind of functional again and normal and throwing it deep. I don't know what happened to him the first 2 months of the season. He just looked like a broken quarterback. He looked so much better in his rookie year, but against the Chargers, he looked like rookie Will Levis, who's not an amazing quarterback, but is good enough to get the ball downfield.
Well, I think he got a little bit of time. I think first off, matchups been a little bit easier, but also the offensive line was so brutal. He was constant, whether it was the Jets game or the Bears game, he was just under siege. Like I just felt like that entire game. And one of his mistakes was he was trying to do too much, trying to do too much kind of superhero ball.
He almost needed the break.
Yeah, a little bit, because just he wasn't getting any help from his teammates. So good to see the improved play from last week, and I do think Calvin Ridley's going to have a nice game on Sunday.
Yep. Right now playing right tackle for the Texans is Leroy Watson, whose work I'm not overly familiar with, undrafted out of the UTSA Roadrunners, who I'm not sure are known for their football program. They've cost me a lot of money in college basketball over the journey, the Roadrunners, but I mean, that's where they're at the moment. Yeah. Well, I needed the Roadrunners to cover like a +20 spread, and then they literally didn't hit the rim the last 5 minutes of a game last season. So I'm against.
To be fair,
you're
I'm
anti-Roadrunner.
anti-Roadrunner.
Right.
You kind of
more of a Wile E. Coyote type of guy.
Fair enough, but in fairness to the Roadrunners, I mean, like if you're betting the UTSA Roadrunners to cover a 20-point spread,
you knew what you signed up for.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly.
I'm not kidding. They didn't hit the rim for 5 minutes. It's unbelievable. It's just all turnovers and air balls. I've never seen anything like it.
How did you even find the game to watch? Is UTSA on TV a lot?
Well, that's the problem now, is that everything is accessible in various streaming services, so you can always watch these bad teams play.
I remember this might have been 2 or 3 years ago. I had a bet on like the Las Vegas Aces under, like a WNBA game, and like I had to watch it on Facebook.
Yeah.
Like I mean now obviously the WNBA has like a lot more distribution, but I had like a really good WNBA bet that I liked, and like I couldn't find, it wasn't, the only place it aired was like on Facebook.
Yes.
And so I'm sitting there on my phone like, like
now I can get perfect definition of UTSA Roadrunners.
Yeah, exactly. Like I play some defense against them.
That's why we do fantasy football, where every game is very accessible, and so is watching Brock Bowers, guys. Since week 5, Bowers is the tight end 3 in points per game, Jay. He's been one of the best values at a position that has hurt a lot of people this year.
Indeed. Gardner Minshew, still the quarterback, ending that great suspense.
They've committed to him. They've committed him. They're like, we don't want to like all this.
Oh, now he's just the guy.
Yeah, he's the guy.
Okay.
New offensive scheme. I mean, until he's not.
We'll see how long that works.
Yeah.
It's the old Alien versus Predator. Whoever wins, we lose in that quarterback battle.
A little bit of in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
Yes.
Vibes here.
Well, there you go.
It's been a while.
Yeah, welcome back.
Look, Brock Bowers is the number one option, clearly, in an NFL offense.
Yes.
And Gardner Minshew, for all his sins, can get the ball to his players. It's just the other stuff, the turnovers, the sacks, that kill you with Minshew. But I think it's probably good news overall for Bowers that Minshew is the quarterback.
Since week 5, he's the 3rd best tight end in fantasy football, and he's got a 29% target share during that stretch. To your point, he is like, you'll see some Jacoby Myers as well, but on the road as an underdog, Bowers should get a massive workload here. He's my tight end 3. And again, you've got a new coordinator here calling plays, everything like that, and they'll, like, when you get in there, when you get a new job, you're like, all right, what works here?
Yeah.
You know
or empty the bag on all your best ideas.
You're just going to be like, you know what? Our best chance of success is trying to get the ball into Brock Bowers' hands as much as possible.
Yeah.
So
It's been a tough season for the Raiders, but Bowers has been awesome week after week. Some others receiving votes: Khalil Shakir for the Bills, Jauan Jennings with an elevated role in San Francisco. Cedric Tillman's looked good since Amari Cooper got traded from the Browns. Quentin Johnston's been a little touchdown dependent, but effective. Dallas Goedert, of course, on Thursday Night Football against the Commanders. And how about Will Dissly at the bottom of the list there, Matthew? The Chargers tight end. He's got the Bengals. Tight end 17, but still noteworthy if you're desperate.
he's had a 23% target share 3 of the last 4 games as well. He's definitely and as Justin Herbert started to pass more, again, I think if you're tight end desperate, Will Dissly is on the streaming radar. I'm as a top 20 play, but, higher expectations. I do think Dallas Goedert has a nice game tonight against my Commanders. They've given up 3 touchdowns to tight ends in just the last 2 games. Washington has as well. We talked about QJ a lot, but honestly, I think that QJ has a pretty good matchup against Cam Taylor-Britt. Shout out to my friend Mike Clay, who highlighted this matchup in his column. Bengals allow the 4th most yards per game to perimeter wide receivers as well. So I think McConkey actually has the tougher matchup there. I'm heading to Club Sed this weekend. Once again,
No
I'm
cover.
trying to make that happen. There's no cover, Club said. Just Rain's fantasy points there as well. Saints allow the 4th most yards per game to wide receivers. In his 2 starts, he's averaging over 24 fantasy points per game. Give me some Club said this week, except in our league where you outbid me by $1 for him because you were a bastard. I'm in on Jauan Jennings, guys, against Seattle as well. He's top 6 among all wide receivers in yards per target and yards per route run this season. Jennings, we've talked about this a lot. When he gets an opportunity, he produces. It's a good matchup against the Seahawks. And then you mentioned Shakir. He's the one guy that we know is healthy that's going to play. Kincaid's banged up. Amari Cooper's banged up. We know Keon Coleman's not playing in this one as well. And so it does feel like Josh Allen's going to have to throw against the Chiefs in this one as well. Very quietly, 4 straight games with at least 6 receptions, as you mentioned, for Khalil Shakir.
Yep. Jaylen Watson going down for the Chiefs has really hurt that defense. More might be the Chiefs' defense. I don't think is as terrifying as it has been in certainly last year and the start of this year.
Only one team gives up more receptions to the slot than the Kansas City Chiefs, so that is an area that field to attack.
The hate list for pass catchers, headlined by Jayden Reed, for all the Bears, rush defense woes over the last 4 weeks. They've been great against receivers, Jay. I mean, they're allowing the 2nd fewest receptions, 6th fewest yards per game to wide receivers. That might be bad news for the Packers' skilled player, Jayden Reed.
Yeah, and for everything going wrong with Chicago, they do have a really good secondary anchored, obviously, by Jalen Johnston. And Reed is just so inconsistent week to week. He hasn't had he's had more than 6 targets once in a game all season this year. He's been hugely dependent on big plays. Had a really nice game against Detroit, going 5 for 113, but tough matchup outdoors on the road against a tough pass defense with lack of clarity about what usage he's going to get week to week. I think he's still starting Jayden Reed because he's Jayden Reed, but I wouldn't have a great deal of confidence.
He's wide receiver 31 for me this week, and the Bears have yet to allow a touchdown to the slot this season. Yeah. So to your point about inconsistent usage, a lot of mouths to feed in that passing offense. And oh, by the way, the Bears are significant underdogs here in a game in which they don't play good run defense. Like, as you saw earlier in the show, I think it's a big Josh Jacobs game. And so Jayden Reed is a risky low-end wide receiver 3 for me this week.
Josh Downs next on our list, which crushes us because we're big fans of Josh Downs on the show.
Love Josh Downs.
The move back to Anthony Richardson, Matthew, it just kills his efficiency.
I mean, he's caught only 50% of his targets from Anthony Richardson this season. 50%. He's played 3 full games with Richardson. He's been under 6 fantasy points in 2 of them. And the one game that he had off was I remember that it was busted coverage down the sideline. Not only wide open, but he literally had to stop and wait for the ball to get to him. Richardson couldn't hit him in stride. You know the play I'm talking about.
Yeah. I mean, he turned around and he kind of waited there, and there was a lot of run after catch. And listen, they all count the same, but the point is, Matthew, that's unlikely to happen again.
Yeah.
I would say where the other 2 games feel like a more realistic sample size of what you would get from Josh Downs rather than the one outlier game.
Yeah.
But with Joe Flacco, lock in 7 catches, 60 to 70 yards every single week.
1,000%. And this is probably something that you don't cover on Badlands, but we highlighted on Worstlands.
Jets play the Colts this week.
Not only did the Jets play the Colts this week, Connor, you probably covered that on Badlands, but I bet you didn't cover the fact that the Jets allow the 2nd fewest yards per game to the slot. That's actually obviously where Downs lines up the majority of the time, and so the expectation here is that they're going to defend him well with a bad quarterback. Again, that's the kind of analysis you're going to get on Worstlands, but you won't find on Badlands where they just blah, 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 Aaron Rodgers.
We hide.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. We're like the mainstream media.
You are the mainstream media.
We hide a lot of the good stuff.
A lot of the good stuff.
For the greater good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It's I'm just telling you right now what Badlands is nothing but Jets propaganda. That's what it is.
Oh man, if you only knew.
That's what I believe it to be. I've never actually listened to a moment of it, but that's what I believe it is. Again, I'm trying to promote my new podcast, Worstlands, and that's all about
the Giants.
The Giants. But we got nothing to talk about. So we could either if we could either talk about the Giants who are bad, or we could just crap all over you and your podcast.
It's probably
better
content. Way better content.
Thank you. Finally, somebody you understand now. Yes. You get the premise of the show.
Amari Cooper, Jay.
Yeah.
It hasn't been great.
Thanks for the setup, Connor.
You're welcome. That's why I'm here. Sally oop, left and right.
Yeah.
Listen, Amari Cooper hasn't been great since he's moved with the Bills. I know he's been dealing with injury, but the bigger point this week is Kansas City, they shut down perimeter wide receivers.
They do. Now, we'll see how much that continues without Jalen Watson.
Right, that's a good point.
I think that the thing with Amari Cooper is he's played 57 snaps with Josh Allen. And also, I think there's reason to believe that Josh Allen, who I think is the second or third best quarterback in the NFL, there is probably a bit more of a learning curve of playing with Josh Allen than your typical elite quarterback, because so much of his value is outside of structure. Dalton Kincaid spoke about that with us on the show around the Super Bowl. So I think with Cooper, this is a massive game. The Bills are 2.5-point favorites. They win this, there'll be a game out of the 1 seed. Mahomes v. Allen, which is probably the greatest rivalry in football, just given that Mahomes hasn't played Lamar a ton in the playoffs. So I think that it's just a tough spot for Cooper if he's going to play, and he's banged up, and he just hasn't played that much yet, and he'll probably get the McDuffie treatment too.
There's just a lot of uncertainty, right? I mean, a tough matchup. How healthy is he? How much on the same page is he with Josh Allen as well? And it isn't a great matchup, even with Watson out. I mean, since week 6, there have been 2 wide receivers, literally 2, that have scored more than 14 fantasy points against the Chiefs as well. They're really good against perimeter wide receivers in general. So I think it's a James Cook game. I think it's a Khalil Shakir game to try to mix and match. Josh Allen going to do it. Do you like them by 2? Are you surprised? I was surprised that the Bills are. I know the Bills are at home and they're playing well, but the Chiefs are undefeated. And I get it, it's a little bit of luck, and they bet, but they're still undefeated.
Yeah. So Patrick Mahomes has been an underdog 14 times in his career. Do you know how many times he hasn't covered? Once. Once out of 14 times he hasn't covered as an underdog. And I think there is something to that. I don't think that's just like a trend that is just luck. I think Mahomes has another gear. I think Andy Reid runs the real plays in these big games as well. Right. So I'd be taking the Chiefs plus 2.5.
Yeah, I definitely like that as well. Last one here, it's Jake Ferguson. I'm outside my top 10 at tight end. Dallas, the third lowest implied team total this week as well. Last week his average depth of target. Do you know what Jake Ferguson's average depth of target was last week?
Was it negative?
0.0.
It's got to be brutal.
0.0 for you Stern fans out there as well. No team allows fewer receptions or yards per game to tight ends than the Houston Texans as well. Bad matchup. Who knows what's going on with the quarterback? Cooper Rush may get pulled for Trey Lance at some point in this game. Hard to trust Jake Ferguson this week.
The Stars are out in Los Angeles for Sunday Night Football when Justin Herbert and the Chargers host Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Tune into NBC and Peacock at 7 p.m. Eastern as we lead you up to kickoff in Southern California. Taking our first break. When we're back, love-hate continues. We got the quarterbacks right after this.
And I'm just kind of trying to find Brock in the back, which is, it's hard to see sometimes because one of his only shortcomings is that he's not the tallest quarterback. He's just hard to see sometimes. But one thing I love with Brock and scramble drills, if you do lock eyes with him, he is going to give you time to make a move and get open. And so he did. Once we locked eyes, I just tried to give him space in the corner of the end zone, and he just dropped a dime like he always does.
Love-hate quarterbacks. Of course, George Kittle on Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy starts our love list here, guys.
Yeah. George Kittle, friend of the podcast, George Kittle.
That's right.
Of the show.
Yeah.
5 of the last 6 quarterbacks to face Seattle threw for 250-plus yards and 2 touchdowns. This is a great spot here, Jay, for your man, Brock Purdy.
My man, Brock Purdy.
You are the OG Brock Purdy supporter.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if that's good or bad for me and my brand, but I was early on Brock, rode him all the way to Christmas night, and then was really screwed by him against the Ravens with those 4 picks, but that's okay. He's been up and down this year, but I think he's finding a rhythm now. He's got his players, his weapons healthy. CMC back will help a lot. He was great against Seattle when they played recently. He was able to cash our pickup line over Matthew on the longest pass play against the Bucs. So look, Purdy, whenever he plays a suspect defense, he's going to be a locked-in top 10 quarterback, so he's starting Brock in every league.
5 of the last 6 quarterbacks to face the Seattle Seahawks threw for at least 250 yards and at least 2 touchdowns, and that includes Brock Purdy back in Week 6. And I think you could argue the offense is better because of the addition of Christian McCaffrey and Ricky Pearsall's return as well. Just more weapons for the guys, even though they don't have Brandon Ayuk in this one.
As you see here, the quarterbacks versus the Seahawks, it's been pretty good overall.
Daniel Jones, who's going to lose his job this week, scored over 22 fantasy points against them.
Giants won at Seattle. Hard to fathom.
Hard to fathom that one. I picked up Drew Lock in the League of Assholes on the anticipation.
Well, you know anything about Drew Lock, he's going to chuck it. Yeah. He's going to chuck it.
Yeah.
So, I think that's coming.
But don't you think he's going to start?
It feels like, whenever a coach doesn't definitively say they're sticking with a guy, it always
injury
goes
guarantee.
It's the injury guarantee, too.
That, too. There's actually logic applied to this
right.
one, too, for the long-term future for the Giants.
Yes.
All right, Justin Herbert's next on the love list here, Matthew. Since week 8, Herbert's a top 10 quarterback in points per game. They're throwing the ball.
Yeah, I mean, Harbaugh, by the way, I tell my daughters all the time, find somebody that looks at you the way Harbaugh looks at Justin Herbert. Man, he loves that kid, and they've sort of loosened the, I don't know if it's because Herbert's healthier or he's just more comfortable in the offense now, but, they've started to, instead of being so run-heavy, they've started to let him throw it, right? Since week 8, he's the 7th best quarterback in fantasy on a points-per-game basis. 3 straight games now with at least 19 fantasy points, as you see it there on your screen. It's a good matchup against the Bengals, who, over the last 4 weeks are 25th in pass defense.
Next up here, Jay, Russell Wilson. Since week 5, Baltimore is allowing 26 points per game to quarterbacks. You nailed it. It's just a pass funnel defense.
Huge pass funnel defense, elite run defense, terrible pass defense at the moment, which I still don't understand why they're so bad given the personnel. But particularly if Kyle Hamilton misses, which seems very much in play given he didn't practice, Russ will have a very favorable matchup. I suspect the Steelers will be down in this game. They're 3-point dogs, and Russ will need to throw.
I mean, outside of Bo Nix on this list, everybody's gone over 20 points. Multiple guys have gone over 30 points. I mean, it's just, and yeah, listen, Joe Burrow's on this list. Jayden Daniels has been amazing, but Jameis threw well against this team. Baker without all of his weapons. It's just a really good spot for any quarterback right now. Some others receiving votes, Matthew. I mentioned Bo Nix on that list. How about him making the love list on the others receiving votes this week? He's got Atlanta right now. They've struggled for a long stretch here on defense.
They've allowed multiple touchdown passes in 6 straight. They also give the 3rd most rushing yards per game to quarterbacks. Obviously, Nix gets a lot of fantasy points with his legs. He's a top 10 play from this week. I do think C.J. Stroud, this is assuming Nico Collins plays, but we expect him to be active. And so going on the road to Dallas, where the Cowboys are so vulnerable, Stroud has averaged almost 19 points a game with Nico Collins in the lineup. And finally, the revenge game that no one wants to talk about. Jameis Winston going back to New Orleans. All the buzz. It's very similar to Tom Brady returning to Foxborough.
Yes.
Jameis Winston returning to New Orleans as well. Saints, by the way, 29th in pass defense so far this year. Just whatever. Jameis going to chuck it.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the hate list here. A short one. Kirk Cousins. He's got the Denver defense. Not a good spot for Kirk Cousins there, Matthew. Denver is allowing the 3rd fewest yards per completion.
Yeah, by the way, there's been one home game, literally one home game this entire year where the Broncos have given up multiple touchdown passes. This game is in Denver, so Cousins has to go against the Broncos, who have allowed only 14 fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks 3 different times. Literally, it's only been 3 times that a quarterback's even gotten to 14 points against the Broncos on the road. I have Cousins outside my top 20 this week.
Sam Darnold, our other quarterback here, Jay. Tennessee has the number 1 ranked pass defense this season. Darnold's hit a bit of a cold stretch here.
Yeah, I think he's kind of revealed who he is, which is a fine, decent quarterback, but ultimately not the elite MVP caliber quarterback he was looking like to start the season. So tough matchup against the Titans. L'Jarius Sneed anchoring that pass defense. So Sam Darnold, you can probably find better options to start this week.
We're taking our last break. When we're back, our big Thursday night football for Commanders, Eagles. We got our best bets right after this. DraftKings Sportsbook is the number 1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the app and use promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook.
The crown is yours. Crown is yours.
It's time for last call. Let's take a look at the most bet props for
yours.
Thursday Night Football on DraftKings. We got Scary Terry at the top there. Receptions over 4.5. That's a normal line of minus 135. Well, A.J. Brown receiving yards 70+ is at minus 195. Terry McLaurin receiving yards 50+ is minus 215. Jalen Hurts rushing yards 25+, that's minus 380. And then back to Terry McLaurin receiving yards under 62.5 is minus 115. Jay, what do you like in this game?
Going with Zach Ertz, friend of the show. Well, not sure he's ever been on the show, but he's still our friend. Zach Ertz over 3.5 receptions. The past 3 weeks, tight ends against the Eagles have gone over this. Mike Gesicki, Evan Engram, Jake Ferguson. Ertz has gone over in 4 of his past 5 games to suspect, unfortunately, that your Commanders are going to lose Matthew and that they will need to be throwing the ball, and Zach Ertz will be a beneficiary.
Death taxes start your tight ends against the Philadelphia Eagles, no question about that. Look, I gave this out on the futures, and it's already moved a little bit, but yeah, give me the Commanders +4. Okay. They may lose this game, but they're going to play it tough. I just don't think the Eagles blow them out. The Commanders have been in every game this year except the Ravens. And even the Ravens, who I think are a significantly better team than the Eagles, they still were within a touchdown. They've covered quite a bit this year. So, yeah, this is merely a gut call, but division game, short week. I don't think that the Eagles will have had enough time to prepare for Cliff Kingsbury's offense, whereas Dan Quinn, familiar with the Eagles, obviously, from his time in Dallas as a coordinator. Give me the Commanders +4. Hail the Commanders, hail victory.
I'm looking on the Eagles
Cover
side.
Cover first, win later. There we go, Commanders. That's
nice.
your job.
Okay, that's fair enough. I like Jalen Hurts under 27.5 pass attempts. This just feels like a game where the Eagles are going to run the hell out of the football, specifically Saquon Barkley. And honestly, Jalen Hurts might run too. There's no need for him to drop back near 30 times in this game, chucking the ball all around the yard. They're a big play team. So if they hit one of those big plays, it could change the script of the game, but not this, under 27.5 pass.
Just, literally, because I'm on DraftKings right now, I'm literally betting. I always bet our parlays. It just changed to 26.5.
It was
so
28.5 just last night.
Right.
So this is just this is nosediving.
Going down. You still taking it at 26.5?
Well, I got it at 27.5, so that's what I'm giving out.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I literally, in the commercial break, it just accept changes. Anyway. So, but I bet it. I bet it at 26.5 to support you, Connor.
Thank you.
Support the show.
He has not hit this in, I think, 4 of his last 5. They run the hell out of the ball and they do it well.
Yes, they do.
How about the top players in this game, Matthew? This is a big way to kick off Week 11 in fantasy.
Yeah, we already talked about Brian Robinson being outside my top 20. I think he's merely a touchdown-dependent flex. Probably not starting Eckler as well. But all the wide receivers you are, McLaurin, Smith, and, of course, A.J. Brown. I think both tight ends are viable. Goddard I have as a top 10 guy. He made my love list. And I think Ertz, to your point, Jay, is a viable tight end too with a little bit of upside here. And, of course, the quarterbacks and Saquon, you're starting no questions asked.
Yep. Eagles almost the easiest team to understand for fantasy, right? It's as it has been for a couple of years, really, where it's obviously Hurts, Barkley, both wide receivers, and Goedert. You're starting them every single week.
Yeah, and it's same with the Commanders, except just more narrow. It's Jaden Daniels and it's Terry McLaurin. Ertz, I think, is, again, viable in the right matchup. This is the right matchup as well. And I think, you have to be concerned about the running backs a little bit here. But no one else in the passing game. It's, Noah Brown's a nice story, but come on, you're not starting Noah Brown.
I know it seems dumb to say because of the season he's had, but this would really be a statement from
Jayden Daniels.
On
the road. Yeah.
He's had an amazing season, but you do this.
If he goes on the road to Philadelphia and covers the 4.
It's a statement about the division. If he covers the 4, that's all that matters.
Hey, it's closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. For Jay and Connor, I'm Matthew. Go Commanders. Hail victory. Let's go. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotorWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.